The sons of Fenris they are, hardened in the forge of their harsh world, eager for battle and honor. They are the grey warriors as shen like the wolf, whose greatest joy is to hear the clamor of steel amidst the din of war. Here's a look at the brand new McFarlane Toys Warhammer 4000 Space Wolves Wolf Guard. They are the elite veterans of Chapter. To be a member of this select brotherhood is to wield the very deadliest weapon of war while serving as the personal guard of their wolf lord. Just before we see what comes included with one of the Sky Warriors of Rust, grabbing the old tape measure, let's find out first how tall the Space Wolves Wolf Guard stands. Speaking of the Wolf Guard, I'd like to thank the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did provide the sample of the Warhammer 40,000 Wolf Guard that we could have a look in this review. If you count the top of his mohawk, I'm not actually including the backpack because that would technically make the figure just a tad bit taller. But if you want the figure just on its own, then you're looking at it being standing about 7.5 inches in height, or the figure's going to be about 19 centimeters tall. Speaking of backpack, yes, one is included, but before we look at that, the figure comes included with a molded black display stand that is common knowledge by now. That comes included with most, if not everything, that McFarlane is releasing. What's differently done this time around is the fact that they actually printed on their Warhammer 40,000. Sizzled it on there. This does attach to either one of the boots of the Wolf Guard. I mean, obviously, if you look at the figure itself, he does have, though, I guess you could have just assumed he would have had it only on one side, but just to show you guys, he does actually have peg holes on the undersides of both of his boots. The figure also comes included with a trading card. I really like the artwork, though. Something that's interesting, though, is that they don't actually print the name of the character on the front. It's only just the artwork alone. Now, the thing about the Wolf Guards is that they do change. They like to customize their suits and their bolt guns, kind of customize them the way that they like. So, of course, some of the suits may vary just a little bit. It's only, though, until you flip around the back of the card that you see that the name is Wolf Guard, and it's actually part of the Space Wolves. A very simple to read, easy to digest paragraph. In fact, you could read it for yourself. It's the same thing I read at the beginning of this review as well. Yes, I probably could have said that I would have liked a little standee, but I know by now. I mean, that's extra plastic. Really, so much plastic is already being used here for the Wolf Guard. A little standee sure would have been nice, but at least you get yourself a trading card. I'm going to put that in the sheets with the rest of my trading cards. On to now, though, the accessories that come include the Wolf Guard. First, the figure comes included with two hands that aren't really serving much purpose when it comes to actually holding weapons. One happens to be a pointing hand. The other one happens to be a closed fist hand. Both are molded rather nicely in this sort of more pastel light blue plastic. I know right away some would already say, well, I kind of wish that they could have added a bit of a wash to their bodies because it's really very basic blue plastic. I get that. I think looking at this, it kind of reminds me of those old illustration guides of Warhammers. I used to go to my local stores at my local mall. I used to go in there sometimes and just kind of look at people playing the game. And I also used to just quickly flip through the books whenever I had the chance. Kind of reminds me of that. I know, yes, there probably could have been a little more of an opportunity to add a little bit of extra color, but for what it is, we get ourselves these little pastel blue plastic pieces. These hands, by the way, easily just swap out from the existing hands. Just pop them off. I'll probably do that more in a second. The figure also comes included with his power axe. I really like the look of the axe. Again, there was not much in the way of paint. If you're really only looking at it, you're getting just treated to basically black molded plastic. But the actual blade itself, stop joking about that. The blade itself does have some nice decorative detail added in there, some little scratches and things that would happen on the battlefield. All in all, nice looking blade. This, again, does fit into either one of his hands. I know this whole talk about putting things in his hands, I've yet to really do anything. I'll do that in a second. The figure also comes with his bolt gun. One of the things, again, with the Wolves is that they like to add their own customization. They like to add things additionally on top of their armor as well as their weapons. I believe this being the bolt gun, you can see that this particular Wolf Guard decided to add a little spike on the end of it. There's some detail done to the side. It says Russ. There's nothing that actually removes on this. It's molded here, I'm guessing, in black plastic. They probably just painted the end nozzle here in silver and painted the back stock with handle all in a silver as well. And again, this whole talk, you know what? This whole talk about actually fitting things in his hand. The one thing about the hands is one is very much dedicated towards the bolt gun. The plastic itself is also quite soft, so it's a little easier to get this actually in his hand. We'll just take the bolt gun first and just pry the plastic. This whole talk about actually prying plastic. Don't have a struggle now doing it. There we go. Get that in his one hand. And then you can also then take the power axe. And the Power Axe, again, we're just going to pry the plastic. I mean, you don't have to necessarily pry the plastic. It's just because I didn't end up heating the plastic in hot water. You can heat the plastic in hot water. You can also use the trick of the hairdryer. I had this, I thought, at a soft enough place where I could actually bend the plastic, but you're basically just going to take the Power Axe in his hand. I'll do that probably a little bit more in a moment. One thing I did notice, though, about this particular wolf guard, and I can't say if it's across the board or not, is that on one of my arms, it's very loose. Not my arm, although my arm's kind of getting loose over time, but this one arm here is a little on the looser side. I hope, though, it's going to be able to withstand the idea of actually him with his arm out like this, actually wielding the bolt gun. I don't want to think that this is going to start to develop looseness, but I will say, like, the shoulder seems a tad bit loose, though, on him. Let's remove the bolt gun for right now. Let's put it off to the side. The figure also comes included, as already mentioned, even though it was the first thing I mentioned, and it happens to be the last thing we're looking at. The figure also comes with a decoratively detailed backpack. Backpack is still treated to that pastel blue plastic. It does have some different kind of details on the top there. It looks like skulls and different little bones and stuff that he's weaved on top of the actual backpack. But on the back of the backpack, there's a very large peg. If you happen to look on the back of the wolf guard, I mean, what kind of reviewer would I be if I didn't actually show you the back of him? You can see that he has very much a very sightly hole there on the back of his body. You just simply take the backpack, plug it in place. One thing about it, though, is that once you do add it, it's going to add a little bit of obstruction when it comes to moving his arms back. I mean, they still move okay, but he's just going to be banging now against the backpack. How many times have I already now said backpack? I mean, it keeps the colors consistent. Again, there's really no wash, unfortunately, at all added to this. But again, it kind of reminds me of these older, like the older artwork that we would have gotten from Warhammer. I mean, obviously, artwork since they have now washed over across some of the plastics and stuff like that. But I mean, kind of keeping more to the basics colors of these. I don't mind the pastel blue. Maybe in some way I wish that there was a little bit of an extra wash on there, because really, other than just the blue plastic, the only thing that's really driving home the idea that anything's been painted on him is the fact he does have the brighter yellow shoulder pads here on the side that kind of remind me, from some strange reason, like Charlie Brown's shirt. And on the other side, of course, he's got the symbol of the Space Wolves. And one thing I really like about the Space Wolves symbol is that it actually is lifted from the plastic. It isn't just a case that they actually printed the symbol on top of just the smooth plastic. No, they took the time to actually sculpt it in there. Can you see, by the way, I'm running my finger across this? The head sculpt on this guy is really quite good. I wish in a way that they could have also included a secondary head portrait, so you could have actually customized the wolf guard and changed it up. Now, I'm sure, I mean, it goes without saying that they're probably going to be using this body build again and then just releasing it with simply different head sculpts. We might also get ourselves a couple of variations, like with the Platinum Edition McFarlane toy releases or the Gold Label editions. I don't know if the Gold Label editions are specifically set around the DC Multiverse line, but they probably could do something very similar here, I'm thinking, with the Space Wolves, and not, in fact, release this with probably different head sculpt. The head sculpt, for what it is actually really good. It sort of has kind of more of a, like a, I don't want to say dated, but it kind of has a little more of that illustration look to it, as opposed to something that looks a little bit more realistic. Look at the size of the mohawk on this guy. Of course, they've painted nicely the brown on the sides where the stubble would start to show. He's got these big, giant pork chop sideburns on the sides of his face. A really good looking head sculpt on this one. He also has, of course, the crest there on the front here, nicely in gold. This one happens to also sport a bit of a loincloth that's on the front. Normally, the suits normally would not have had that. Just, again, adding a little bit of extra, his own touches of detail. Like, again, he's got a little string of bones down here also as well. So I like the idea. And again, I'm sure they're probably just going to do away with some of these elements, like the bones, for example, the little skull that he has there on his forearm probably then won't be present if we get this guy released again with an alternate head sculpt. Now, for the articulation on this guy, I guess, first of all, I did also want to say, like, the body of him doesn't feel as heavy as he may look. I mean, there's a lot of heavy plastic in here, but it's not as heavy as, like, when you're looking at it, if you're comparing him, and I'm only using the example of one of the other McFarlane toy releases that we did get was the Spawn Overkill. Overkill was a pretty hollow plastic. He doesn't have that kind of weight. He has more weight to him, but he's not as heavy as, like, say, for example, just trying to think of another, what's another good... I'm trying to think of another good McFarlane release where it was big, bulky plastic. Certainly won't be the weight of a Violator. Yes, it definitely won't be the weight of a Violator. But he has weight. He just isn't as heavy as you may think he is. For the articulation, did any of that just make sense? I hope what does make sense is, let's look at the articulation. So his head's going to be on a ball joint. Easily rotates all the way around. The head looks down that far and looks up. One of the benefits of the additional articulation is not only does he have a ball joint where the head is already moving, but you can also see there's a circular disc here that actually has its own hinge. So you can have the head looking further down inside the cavity of his body. You can have it also looking up. Unfortunately, though, by looking at too far up, you're going to see a little gap space right here. But at least they do, again, give you some additional articulation there. As again, for his arms, because he has these large shoulder pads, they do hinge out, but you're not going to be able to hinge them out at full 90 degrees. You're only, if anything, getting them at 45. And see how one arm, I mean, this arm was loose. This arm is a little on the, again, looser side. Bit of a shame considering that this figure has only been out of the packaging for probably about an hour, hour and a half. But there's only there's a little bit of looseness, obviously, there. Arms rotate all the way around, even though he does have the backpack. I did say the backpack kind of gets in the way, but you could really still rotate them all the way around. If anything, you want to just kind of bring the arm a little bit outward. The figure does have a swivel in his bicep. Does also have a what seems only to be a single hinge in his elbow, and the hands do rotate all the way around. His upper torso is going to be on a ball joint. There's seams as well, like there could be the potential there for a secondary ball joint, although it's just a little tighter on this figure. Ironically enough, it's loose here, but it's super tight in like his mid-abdomen area. He has the skirting on the side, which is going to limit a little bit of the articulation when it comes to bringing those legs outward, but you can take them and move them forward. You can move them back. A swivel at the top of the thigh, a double hinge, a double hinge on the knee. And then when it comes to his ankle moves back and forth this way. And you can also rock it back and forth, just not as much this way. And there's also a no articulation. For when you look at it, certainly from the top, it in a way looks like there should be some toe articulation. If you look at the bottom of it, there's no hinge actually happening there. Nice looking figure. Again, when you're looking at a figure like this, some fans for Warhammer 40,000 may look at this and think, man, I kind of wish in a way that they could have added a little bit of an extra wash to it. And I get that. I think one thing I really like about this is it does remind me of those illustration strategy guides, those reference guides I would have seen back in the day when I was, like, we're talking early days of high school, going to my local, well, it wasn't even my local mall. It was a mall that was a bit out of the way, but that mall had a game place, like a game workshop place that had all the kids generally playing Warhammer. And I always used to love seeing those little tiny miniatures. And while I was there, I never really ended up buying anything, to be honest, but I would sit and watch the games. I'd kind of flip through the panel, like flip through the strategy guides and kind of see like the old illustrations. This is kind of what the figure reminds me of. It does maybe lack a little bit of the additional wash that they probably could have added to modernize the figure, but by maybe pulling back the paint just a little bit as they did, it sort of does give him a little more of a retro look. Kind of like he would have been a more retro figure, but just with the benefit of additional articulation. I may have actually said that the Wolfguard only had single hinges in his elbows, and it's not actually the case. While unfortunately dealing with overly loose shoulders, getting this guy only out of the packaging for about an hour, that shouldn't really be the case. Quite the opposite was the case when it came to his elbows. His elbows were so tight, I really had to force to get them to work, and now I've got actually the figure displayed in a pretty cool pose, if I do say so myself, where he's got one axe across the shoulder, and he's carrying around the bolt gun in the other. It's a nice looking figure. I don't really have a purpose yet just for those alternate hands, but if we do get ourselves any more Wolfguards, if we haven't already, I probably then will have one of the figures displayed pointing the rest of the battalion into charge. The figure is nicely detailed for what it is. Now, again, I get the whole idea that he doesn't really have a lot of additional paint. Opportunities obviously could have been there where the team could have added some wash or something across the surface of the plastic just to weather it a little bit more than what it is. The plain white blue plastic may be a bit jarring for fans of Warhammer 40,000. I'm sure if you're an artist that could probably go in there and just touch up some of the details, you probably could take what we're looking at right now and jazz it up a whole lot more. The paint for what he has at least is done well. The yellow is one thing that is always a problem really on figures, that if you're not putting enough coats of it, it doesn't look like it's solid. There are a few little areas like coming up right now to the Space Wolves symbol where some of the yellow doesn't look like it probably could have used a second coat. But the gold crest on the front, not to mention all the decorative details that this particular Wolfguard has added to his suit, do make for a nice looking figure. But again, there's always an opportunity for someone with customizing skills to go in there and touch up some of those details. What do you guys think of the new Space Wolves Wolfguard from Warhammer 40,000? Have you had the chance yet to pick this one up for yourself? Big thank you once again to the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did provide this sample we could have a look at. If you are also a big fan of Warhammer 40,000, Let me know down below what your favorite group is. Also, hey, as well, if you guys did enjoy this video, I want to throw it a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and would like to stick around for more, we may also as well be looking at some more of Warhammer 40,000. So if that's the kind of thing you enjoyed this video and would like to see more of this kind of video, more will be coming your way. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.